Welcome to be here with all of you tonight. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. We are going to have yet another one of our late night conversations. Very important topic tonight. So should be good. Glad to have you all here with us. Let's do it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. I hope that you are doing well. Dealing with spring allergies, but all is well. We are going to have yet another one of our late night conversations about a very important topic, which is that the U.S. Congress just passed, at least the House of Representatives just passed some very crazy legislation, and people don't seem to realize how potentially dangerous this is. But before we get to that, for those of you who may not be familiar with the way we do things on this channel, I generally give my opening remarks. And while I'm giving my opening remarks, I am taking note of your super chats and your Rumble rants. If you would like me to answer any questions you've got, by all means, send me a super chat or send me a Rumble rant. If you're on Rumble, you can send me a Rumble rant. If you're on YouTube, you can send me a YouTube super chat. What I do is I give my opening remarks. Then in the second half of our show, I answer those questions. Now, before that, we do a roll call where we find out who is on the other side of the camera and who's watching. That's always a lot of fun. And it's a three-part show. Opening remarks, roll call, answering your questions. So it's your questions that make the second half of the show work. No big announcements at the moment. We are coming out of an amazing retreat weekend workshop in Vermont that was excellent. I'm looking to edit some of the video. It was just really, really awesome and tremendous. That's going to be great. It was really, really great. Keep the date July 7th in mind, because it looks like we're going to be calling a demonstration in Washington, D.C. We're in the process of arranging the permits. The NATO summit is going to be happening. The North Atlantic terrorist organization that destroyed Libya, that occupied Afghanistan, that is threatening to bring us to the brink of World War III with Russia. They're having a summit to celebrate and commemorate their 75th anniversary, and we will be having one of the events to oppose that summit. So if you can join us in Washington, D.C. on the afternoon of July 7th, I would keep that date in mind. Keep that date in mind. We don't have an official date yet. We don't have an official call, but we will. We'll have a poster and a permit and all kinds of stuff. So just keep July 7th on your radar screen. It's going to be a very, very important day, July 7th. So in other news, folks, the Center for Political Innovation, our organization, is marching ahead. We just had a great weekend workshop. We're having our weekly Zoom calls, and we're planning some important interventions coming up that I'm going to be telling you about, trying to intervene in the ongoing political crisis. So on that note, keep super chats in mind for the second half of our show, make the second half of our show interesting. And now I'm going to jump into my opening remarks for tonight. Oh, real quick, I did an interview this afternoon with Chairman O'Malley, the leader of the African People's Socialist Party, who's currently under indictment for allegedly being a Russian agent. We did an interview with him, and that interview went amazingly well. We had a great conversation, got very friendly, and he's a great anti-imperialist, and we need to do all we can to support them. So go and watch that interview. It was earlier today, live on this channel. All right, so now I'm going to get into my opening remarks. I don't know if you've seen this, But the U.S. House of Representatives just passed a law enacting the definition of anti-Semitism of the International Holocaust Remembrance Association as the official U.S. government declaration of anti-Semitism. Now, what does that mean? Well, currently, it is federal law that the U.S. government cannot engage in any form of discrimination, which is great. I don't think the government should discriminate against anybody on the basis of their race, their religion, whatever. However, previously, the law simply said that you could not discriminate against anyone for being Jewish. Fair enough, right? We shouldn't discriminate against anyone on the basis of their ethnic background, their religion, etc. But now, the U.S. House of Representatives just passed a law which expanded the definition of anti-Semitism in the federal policies to be much broader than simply discriminating against Jews. And I actually have the definition of anti-Semitism that was passed by the federal government. Now, we really ought to bring a legal scholar on here to explain the implications. But if this gets signed into law, and this is already recognized by the U.S. State Department, right? But if this gets signed into law, basically the federal government cannot cooperate with anyone, any person, any corporation, any business, anything that is contrary to these principles. And it's a lot more than simply discriminating against Jewish people. I am against all forms of bigotry. I am against all form of discrimination, right? No one should be targeted for anything that's not their fault, anything that has to do with who their parents were or where they grew up or what their religious adherence is. But I'm going to go over with you now. I have the definition here, and I'm going to show you that this definition basically makes it illegal to be a Christian in America, and it also makes it illegal to be a communist in America. Now, that might sound crazy, right? There's probably some communists watching saying, I don't care if it makes it illegal to be a Christian. There's probably some Christians watching who say, I don't care if it makes it illegal to be a communist. It makes it illegal to be both. And we will show why. Now, I have the actual definition here on the screen. We're just going to go over it point by point because it seems almost too real, too surreal to be true. But this is the official definition that the U.S. House of Representatives just voted is the new definition of anti-Semitism. So, first one, it says it's anti-Semitic, it's anti-Semitism to calling for aiding or justifying the killing or harming of Jews in the name of a radical ideology or extremist view of religion. Well, of course, that should be opposed, right? Again, calling for harming any race or religious group on the basis of being that race in the name of any ideology should be illegal. So that one, I don't have an issue with. I don't think anyone of common sense would have an issue with. But the next one, making mendacious, demonizing, or stereotypical allegations about Jews, such as the power of Jews as a collective, such as, especially but not exclusively, the myth of a world Jewish conspiracy or Jews controlling the media, economy, government, or societal institutions. Now, that's a weird one. That's a weird one. If you argue that the Israeli lobby has a lot of power and influence in the government, is that a violation of this? If you argue that the media has a huge bias in support of Israel, is that a violation of this? That's a very, very broad sweeping statement. Making mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing, or stereotypical allegations about Jews, such as the power of Jews as a collective. If you argue that Jewish folks, when they get together and they can have a lot of influence, if you say that, which is commonly said, it's something Jewish people brag about their ability to come together as a people and stick up for each other and change government policy. But I guess if you acknowledge that, that's anti-Semitic. So that second one right off the back, That doesn't make any sense, right? We're not allowed to acknowledge that Jews as a group have a lot of influence on the economy, on the government, on the media. I mean, right off the back, they're starting to say, wait a second, hold up, right? Third one, accusing Jews as being responsible for real or imagined wrongdoing committed by a single Jewish person or group, or even for acts committed by non-Jews. That's a weird one. I mean, I get what they're saying, right? If I get robbed by a member of a certain race, and I don't blame that individual, I blame the race that robbed me, that's racism. That's unacceptable. So I kind of can understand that one, right? That, if somebody who happens to be of a certain race or ethnic group does a bad thing, and you blame that bad thing on the entire group, that's discrimination, right? That's a form of bigotry. So that one I can kind of understand. I get it, right? If I got robbed by a Polish person and I said, God damn, all those Poles are a bunch of thieves, that would be a form of bigotry, right? So that third one, I'll take it. I'll let that one pass. But the second one already, right? The second one already I'm asking questions about, but it gets better. Fourth, denying the scope mechanism of the Holocaust, right? No one wants to question the Holocaust, right? No one wants to go down that rabbit hole. I can understand why people would think that questioning, a very real, horrendous crime against humanity would be unacceptable. But the list continues. The list continues. Hold on. It goes on. Accusing Jews as a people or Israel as a state of inventing or exaggerating the Holocaust. Again, right? No one wants to try to deny or say the Holocaust didn't happen. That's obviously not a productive thing. So that one, I can understand why that's offensive. The next one, accusing Jewish citizens of being more loyal to Israel or to the alleged priorities of Jews worldwide than the interests of their own nations. Now, that one is very, very interesting, especially when you remember that right now, I just interviewed Chairman O'Malley of the African People's Socialist Party. He is indicted, and he is facing a possible 10 years or 15 years in prison because it's alleged that he's an unregistered lobbyist for Russia, because he engaged in, his anti-imperialist activism. They allege that he's an agent of Russia. So this looks to me like it's saying that no Jewish person could ever be charged the way he's been charged, right? Because, that's what they used against Donald Trump supporters, this unregistered foreign lobbyists law, this idea that if you're a foreign lobbyist, you must register, right, as a foreign lobbyist. It looks to me like they're saying that no Jewish person can ever be charged. And it's worth noting that the American Israeli Political Action Conference, AIPAC, the bulk of it is not registered, even though AIPAC is a foreign lobby. The Israeli lobby is a foreign entity. It is a foreign lobby that is lobbying on behalf of a foreign government. It is not registered. So this here looks right like here that like if you were to ever allege that any Jewish person was acting in the interest of Israel or against the interest of the United States, or acting more in the interest of Israel than they are for America, if you allege that they were putting Israel first rather than America first, that's anti-Semitism. Well, I'm sorry, but I don't buy that one. That one is ridiculous, right? There are plenty of people in the United States, many of whom are not Jewish, many of whom are Christians, many of whom are just people that are blatantly pro-Israel, that advocate policies that are in the interest of Israel and not in the interest of the American people and the United States. And the idea that I'm not allowed to mention that, right? That if I see a Jewish person, an individual Jewish person, who is advocating policies that are beneficial to Israel, but not beneficial to America, I can't point that out. I can't say that they're doing that. Well, I'm sorry. If I see that, I, as an American, have the right to say, I think you are acting in the interest of a foreign power. I have the right to say that. And people can say that to me all they want. If people think that I'm, not acting, I think part of our constitutional right to free speech is that you should have the right, if you think someone is advocating policies that benefit another country and hurt your country, you should have the right to say it. That one's just absolutely crazy. That is a ridiculous thing. So if a Jewish person is advocating policies, being more loyal to Israel than to the United States, you're not allowed to say it. Don't buy it. Don't buy it. Denying Jewish people their right to self-determination by claiming that the existence of the state of Israel is racist. You're not allowed to say that Israel is racist. Is this a joke? Israel is a country that was set up to be a state for one race, one ethnic group. And it was set up by one of the most racist colonial powers, the British Empire, to be a state for one race. You are not allowed to say that Israel is racist. This is ridiculous. This is utterly ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous. You're not allowed to say that Israel is racist. Well, Israel is racist. And many Jewish people are the first ones to tell you that Israel is racist. Israel is racist. And it is now, according to this rule, you cannot say that Israel is racist. You cannot say that a group of white people from Europe going to an Arab land in the Middle East and setting up a state that was only for the white Europeans, where the non-white Europeans had second-class citizenship, you're saying that I am not allowed to say that is racist. That's ridiculous. That is completely ridiculous. Next one, applying double standards by requiring of it a behavior not expected or demanded of any other democratic nation. No one's doing that. No one's doing that. If any other country were engaging in the mass bombing in Gaza that Israel is engaged in, it would be opposed, right? If any country in the world was doing what Israel is doing in Gaza, it would be opposed. This is absolutely ridiculous. Next one, using symbols or images associated with classic anti-Semitism, such as claims of Jews killing Jesus. Did you hear that? Now, Elaine Pagels, who I've often referenced, I've studied her work. Elaine Pagels maintains that the whole Jewish, crowd saying crucify him, she maintains that was added to the Bible. She maintains that was because of the fact that the Christian church wanted to be legal in Rome, and that in order to do that, they had to put the onus of executing Jesus on someone else. If Jesus had been executed for treason by the Roman Empire, which is crucifixion was reserved only for those who engaged in armed uprisings against the Roman Empire. So if Jesus had been crucified by the Romans for waging an uprising, it would be quite a bad thing to worship him in Rome. And Elaine Pagels, the Bible scholar, she maintains that was added to the Bible, and she disputes the factuality of that. Regardless, though, that is what the Bible says. That is what the Bible says. The Bible does say that Pontius Pilate wanted to let Jesus go, and the crowd of Jewish folks demanded that Jesus be crucified. That is what the Bible says. And the Bible is an important historical document that has influenced hundreds and hundreds of years of human civilization, 2,000 years of human civilization. So right now they're saying that the Bible can't be promoted. If you have a business that promotes the Bible, you can't get any federal funding. If you yourself promote the Bible, you can't get a job working for the government. The Bible is now illegal, according to this. This is nuts. Drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis. I mean, that's ridiculous. The internet compares everyone who ever existed to the Nazis. If you are on the internet for more than 15 minutes, somebody is going to compare you to the Nazis. But I guess if you're Israel, that's off limits. Israel gets this special treatment. I get called a Nazi 24 hours a day. If you are on the internet for more than 15 seconds, people compare you to a Nazi. Everybody gets called a Nazi. But now Israel is the one country that if you call them a Nazi, they will cut off your federal funding. The government has to boycott you. This is ridiculous. And the final one, holding Jews collectively responsible for the actions of the state of Israel, which is what this entire list does. Right? This whole list says that if you oppose Israel, you oppose Jews. And then at the end it says, oh, and if you equate Jews with Israel, so according to this list is anti-Semitic. Now that last one, they're just messing with you. Right? That's what they call in hypnotic or hypnotic circles, they call that a double bind. They just gave you a whole list of things you're not allowed to say criticizing Israel, or else you're anti-Semitic. And then they said, and if you think Israel and Jews are the same, you're anti-Semitic. Right? This list cancels itself out at the end because they're just making fun of us. I mean, the whole list is saying that all kinds of legitimate points one could say about Israel being a white settler colonial state, all kinds of points about Israeli lobbyists not being in the interest of America, all kinds of points like that are somehow anti-Semitic. And then it ends by saying, and if you equate Israel with Jews, that's anti-Semitic. This list is anti-Semitic. So this is a particularly ridiculous, just utterly ridiculous claim. I mean, this is absurd. But if you don't think that this makes it illegal to be a Christian, I would point you toward reading the Christian Bible, because there are a number of Bible verses that violate this. And I've got those Bible verses right here for you to see, right? This is 1 Thessalonians 2, verses 14 and 15. For you, brothers and sisters, became imitators of God's churches in Judea, which are in Christ Jesus. You suffered from your own people the same thing those churches suffered from the Jews, who killed the Lord Jesus Christ and the prophets and drove us out. They displease God and are hostile to everyone. So that is a verse from the Bible. So if you own a Bible, you are already in violation of this law, because Thessalonians 2, verses 14 says that. Someone's going to screenshot this and say that I made a whole stream about this, which is not what I said. But whatever. And I'll show you another verse from the Bible, right? That was Thessalonians 2:14. All right. Well, we'll do a couple others. Right? There's a number of verses from the Bible. I mean, whether you dispute it theologically or not does not matter. They are saying that if you own a Bible, if you say or think these things, if you are in possession of someone, if you get up and say the Bible is true, if the Bible is the word of God, that means you're saying that these verses are okay, and that means you're anti-Semitic. This is ridiculous, right? Acts 10:39. We are witnesses of all things which he did both in the land of the Jews and in Jerusalem, who they slew and hanged on a tree. Right there, right? Again, that's another Bible verse that if you quote that Bible verse, Acts 10:39, you are somehow anti-Semitic, right? And we'll keep going. I mean, it's not the only place in the Bible that it says such things. All right, the whole Jews killing Jesus thing. This is Matthew 27:22 through 25. What shall I do then with Jesus, who is called the Messiah? Pilate asked. They all answered, crucify him. Why? What crime has he committed? Asked Pilate. But they shouted all louder, Crucify him. And when Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but instead of an uproar was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. I am innocent of this man's blood. It is your responsibility. And all the people answered, his blood is on us and our children. All right. Now, again, Elaine Pagels disputes the historical accuracy of this. And I don't think this has anything to do with any Jewish person who's alive today. And I don't think the idea, which happened in the past, they persecuted Jewish people. The idea that that any modern Jewish person has anything to do with this, even if this is really what happened, which Elaine Pagels and others dispute. That's not the point, though. You're not allowed to say this, right? This is exactly what the new laws say you're not allowed to say. This is in the Bible. The Bible is now illegal, right? I mean, this is a passage from the Bible, and you're not allowed to say this. And anyone who says this is by definition anti-Semitic. This is ridiculous. But there's more. I mean, I just showed you a number of places in the Bible that violate this statement. And we're now being told we are not allowed to say them. We're not allowed to acknowledge them. Basically, this means if you are a Christian, you can't work for the federal government. You can't be employed by the federal government because you believe in something called the Bible, which has these verses that do blame the Jews for killing Jesus. Whether you think that or not, I mean, this is ridiculous. This essentially bars all Christians from any place in government. This is ridiculous. Next. Revelations 2:9. I know thy works and tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them that say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. And, right, Revelations 3:9 says something very similar. Hold on. Where's Revelations 3:9? Hold on. I will find Revelations 3:9, a very similar quotation. But I mean, this is really absurd, right? Yeah, okay, Revelations 3:9, right? So I'm showing you place after place in the Bible that says things that violate this rule. Behold, I will make of them synagogue of Satan, who say they are Jews and are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them come and worship at thy feet, and to know that I have loved thee. There you go, right? The New Testament of the Bible is basically illegal under these rules. I mean, this is an absolute attack on the religious freedom of Americans. But there are probably people watching who say, well, maybe the Bible was used to justify persecution of Jews throughout history, which it was, right? Let's not pretend that didn't happen. There was horrendous persecution of Jews throughout the Middle Ages. Often they did use the Bible to justify it. But hey, maybe you say, I'm not religious. I am a Marxist. I am a communist. I am a Marxist. I am a communist. And, I believe I have no problem with them saying the Bible is anti-Semitic, but I believe in Marxism. Well, let's pull on the screen. What was one of those things that you're not allowed to say? One of those things that you're not allowed to say is that you're not allowed to say that the state of Israel, is a racist endeavor. And you're not allowed to say that the state of Israel shouldn't exist. You're not allowed to oppose the existence of the state of Israel. This is Vladimir Lenin. This is precisely what the Jewish problem amounts to: assimilation or isolation. The idea of a Jewish nationality is definitely reactionary, not only when expounded from the list of its consistent advocates, the Zionists, but likewise on the lips of those who try to combine it with the ideas of social democracy, the Bundists. The idea of a Jewish nationality runs counter to the interests of the Jewish proletariat, and for it fosters among them, directly or indirectly, a spirit hostile to assimilation, the spirit of the ghetto. That's from the works of Vladimir Lenin. He himself said that the idea of a Jewish nationality was reactionary. So it is now illegal to be an adherent of Lenin and Lenin's teachings, right? But then it gets better. It gets better. Marx had a few points to make on these points as well. What did Marx say? The Jew has emancipated himself in a Jewish manner, not only because he has acquired financial power, but also because through him and also apart from him, money has become a world power, and the practical Jewish spirit has become the practical spirit of Christian nations. The Jew has emancipated themselves insofar as Christians have become Jews. That's Marx. There's another quote from Marx. Right? You're not allowed to say that Jewish people have an exponential amount of power or influence, right? Oh, that's the one I just showed. Here, we'll show another one. Marx also said, let us not look for the secret of the Jew in his religion, but let us look for the secret of his religion in the real Jew. What is the secular basis of Judaism? Practical need, self-interest. And where is the worldly religion of the Jew? Huckstering. And what is the worldly god? Money. Very well, then. Emancipation from huckstering and money, consequently from practical real Judaism, would be the self-emancipation of our time. Those are both quotations from Karl Marx. So Karl Marx's work is now illegal, right? You are not allowed, according to this, to say that Israel is racist. You are not allowed to say that Israel as a country shouldn't exist. You are not allowed to question the loyalty of people that lobby on behalf of Israel. You are not allowed to reference the Bible and its narrative about who is responsible for the death of Jesus. You are not allowed to quote certain verses from the Bible that describe Jews as having the blood be on their children. I mean, this is a huge attack on our civil liberties, right? You are not allowed to compare what Israel is doing to what the Nazis are doing. You are not allowed to, I mean, there's just about a million things that are completely legitimate that are not allowed. Now, obviously, blaming something done by some Jewish people on all Jewish people wouldn't be acceptable, right? Obviously, trying to say the Holocaust didn't happen, that's not acceptable. Obviously, I mean, there are things that are obviously unacceptable. I mean, we went over the list. I read them over there, and there are some things on that list that I would agree are unacceptable. But the idea that you can't say that Israel is racist, the idea that you can't compare what Israel does to the actions of the Nazis, even though everyone in the world gets compared to Nazis, even though you cannot, question the loyalty of Israeli lobbyists. I mean, none of these are reasonable concerns at all, right? None of these are reasonable. And this is at a time that all over the country, young people, college students are out protesting on their college campuses, demanding that they have the right to disagree with U.S. foreign policy, and demanding that their college stop being complicit in genocide. And at the same time that's happening all over the country, we have a situation where they're trying to make it a crime to say any of these very, very reasonable things. This is just absurd, what this law, and there should be way more outrage about it. There should be way more outrage about it. They are essentially trying to outlaw any criticism of Israel, any criticism of the Israeli lobby and what it does, which is lobby on behalf of a foreign power. This is just downright absurd what they are advocating. It's utterly absurd, and it must be opposed. I mean, there's no way around this. So I just had to get this out of my system. I don't see how those guidelines are in any way defensible, right? I am opposed to any form of ethnic bigotry. I am opposed to any form of hatred of any person on the basis of their religion or ethnicity. But I don't think Israel deserves to get a free pass for what it's doing to the Palestinians. It just doesn't deserve to get a free pass. I don't think Israel should be held above criticism. I think that's ridiculous. And I look at these new rules, and they just strike me as absurd. And the fact that they're being passed while there's basically an uprising happening on our campuses opposing what Israel is doing. I mean, this is clearly an attempt to stifle and silence Americans who just see what's going on, who see that Israel's ongoing bombardment of Gaza is unacceptable. But anyway, folks, I do have more things I want to talk about with all of you tonight. But before we do that, I'm going to put on my report, because yesterday I did go and cover the anti-Israel protest that happened in Union Square, or in Foley Square. There was a big gathering in Foley Square to oppose Israeli crimes. And, it was May 1st. And so, as that's going on, there's all this outrage in the government about how dare people criticize Israel, et cetera. And they're trying to cut the funding of universities. And there's this anger about the ongoing uprising. So I went to the protest and I interviewed a number of protesters, and I did a story about how ironic it is that, if this protest movement against Biden and his support for Israel was happening in any other country, especially if it was happening in Russia or China or Iran, U.S. media would be cheering for it. So this is my report from yesterday. This was, it aired all yesterday. This was my report from the rally yesterday.
Agree with the Israeli government, but you can't call for genocide. That moves into anti-Semitism, and that should be something that we actually speak out on and make very clear on every single campus.
When it comes to the ongoing bombardment of Gaza, U.S. officials don't see a problem. They say no evidence of genocide. Carry on, Israel. However, the protests against Israel's bombing have gotten a lot of scrutiny. Despite the involvement of plenty of Jewish students and plenty of statements otherwise, U.S. officials insist that there's probably a way these protests are somehow a form of coded anti-Semitism. And the ongoing police crackdown on the protesters has highlighted the inconsistency of U.S. officials and their rhetoric about human rights and freedom of speech.
Crackdown on the students is symbolic on the crackdown on the people of Palestine, of Gaza, and it's being perpetrated in the name of my religion. Zionism and the whole state is masquerading. It's a nationalism, it's a flawed nationalism, it's a totally contradictory to serving God.
It's showing the true teeth of the oppression of this country. They say we're a free country, but the minute we do something they don't like, they send the cops in on us. If that's not fascism, I don't know what is.
It shows, what did Gandhi say? Gandhi said, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you. We're at the fight you stage. You know what comes next, then you win. Yeah. So, they're afraid. It shows their fear.
Imagine that these protests were happening in China or Russia or Iran. U.S. media would be singing their praises and condemning the crackdown. But as students get expelled or suspended from their universities and dragged away by police, U.S. media just repeats the same old message.
Peaceful protests have been hijacked by those aggressive, spewing anti-Semitic and anti-Israel and at some fronts, anti-American rhetoric.
These folks took over building. They hurled anti-Semitic comments. It's just a sad testament to where our higher education institutions are.
It's an organized mob trying to ensue chaos and breed anti-Semitism.
So, of course, now we hear about George Soros, the notorious globalist billionaire who's reportedly funding some of the pro-Gaza mobilizations.
These are funded by many of the same outside groups like George Soros, other dark money groups that support Antifa and other riots that we've seen in our American cities in the past few years.
George Soros has been funding protests across the world in places like Ukraine and Yugoslavia for years, and generally bringing it up and talking about the Open Society Institute or the various NGOs that fund demonstrations and regime change operations gets you dismissed as a conspiracy theorist in Western countries. But now that the protests against Israel's bombardment of Gaza are taking place, suddenly the activities of Protest Incorporated are being brought up with outrage. With protests against Israel's bombing of Gaza growing around the world, with encampments and demonstrations happening on an almost daily basis, reflecting what is majority sentiment around the world, at this point, American officials are having to unexpectedly rework their script about protests and human rights and oppressive regimes. Looks like they're getting a little bit of their own medicine. Time to wake up and smell the ashes. Caleb Maupin, RT, New York.
Yes, that was my report yesterday from the May 1st demonstration. And you know what? This is a wild, wild time. Now, I do want to reiterate to you all what's happening here. All right. And I want to just put it in proper context. So what we're living under right now is capitalism in its monopolistic stage, imperialism, the rule of the world by big banks and corporations that hold on to power and stay at the top of the world by keeping the world poor, holding back development, making sure that they can stay rich by keeping the world poor. There's a global system of big banks and ultra monopolies, trusts, cartels, and syndicates that dominate the world, and they hold back development, and they capture sections of the world as captive markets, and they hold back development in the impoverished corners of the world in order to stay rich. And there's many examples of this. One great example that I always point to is NAFTA, right? NAFTA was signed into law, the North American Free Trade Agreement, and it enabled American agribusiness to go into Mexico and put Mexico and the Mexican corporations, the Mexican farmers out of business. And the people of Mexico have been growing their own food for thousands of years, since long before Christopher Columbus ever showed up. But now the Mexican people import their food from the United States. That's imperialism. They used to be growing their own food, and now they must import their food from foreign corporations. Another example that I always use to explain what imperialism is when the British Empire went to India. The people of India had been weaving and making their own cloth for thousands of years, and they had looms. They sewed together their own cloth, but the British burned down the textile looms of India, and they burned them down, and they forced the people of India that had been weaving for thousands of years to import their cloth and their textile goods from Britain. They underdeveloped India. Another great example, we all know about Mahatma Gandhi. What was Gandhi arrested for doing? What was his act of civil disobedience? Well, Gandhi went to the ocean and he got salt water and he boiled it and he made his own salt out of salt water. And the British police arrested him for doing that because in India, it was a law that you had to buy salt from British corporations. They set it up so that all the salt that was sold in the stores of India was imported by British corporations. And they arrested him for boiling his own salt because he was manufacturing, he was making his own product. And that was considered to be an attack on the domination of the Indian market by the British Empire. Another example of imperialism. What country in Africa has the greatest oil exports? Nigeria. Nigeria is exporting more oil than any other African country. So you would think that Nigeria, with such natural wealth, would be the richest country in Africa. Those Nigerians would be living very well, but you would be wrong if you thought that, because the oil of Nigeria is controlled by ExxonMobil and BP and Shell and Chevron. American and British corporations control the natural wealth of Nigeria. So it's extracted, but most of the wealth goes to British corporations. And in Nigeria, you'll find that they have a very low life expectancy. They have a very low rate of literacy. They have a huge rate of child poverty. They're about to have a food crisis in Nigeria because the food production around the world is going down. Why are the people of Nigeria so poor when their country is so wealthy? They are exporting more oil. They are supplying more oil to any country in the world than they're supplying more oil than any other African country, but yet they live in poverty. Why? Because they don't control their oil. It's imperialism. This is what imperialism is. It is a system of capitalism in its monopolistic stage, and it is about keeping the world poor. Before the war in Libya, where NATO bombed and destroyed the country, Libya had the highest life expectancy on the African continent because under the leadership of Muammar Gaddafi and Islamic socialism, Libya had seized control of its own oil and used its oil to build itself up. And they had built the world's most large, the greatest irrigation system, the great man-made river, and they had raised Libya up. But now, since Libya has joined the free trade, free market, Western capitalist system, since NATO bombs backed up foreign rebels that were imported into the country and violently overthrew the government, Libya is now one of the poorest countries in the world, and people are drowning in the Mediterranean trying to get out of Libya as a result of joining the global free trade system. Iraq used to be much more stable and prosperous, but then, with shock and awe, the U.S. imperialists invaded Iraq and destroyed Iraq, and now Iraq is in chaos and ruin and death and destruction. Right? Afghanistan was occupied by the United States for 20 years, and for 20 years it was unstable. For 20 years, drug gangs and terrorist groups proliferated. There's many examples of how this imperialist system devastates and destroys countries. After the fall of the Soviet Union, when the Soviet Union fell in the 1990s, Russia and Ukraine and Moldova and Latvia and Lithuania and all the former countries of the Soviet Union were economically devastated. Life expectancy dropped, living standards declined. Andrei Gunder-Frank called it economic genocide, what was done in the former Soviet Union. The free trade, open international system, capitalism in its monopolistic stage of imperialism, was supposed to bring freedom and prosperity to Eastern Europe, but it brought devastation. Imperialism is about keeping the world poor so that the giant corporations and ultra monopolies that sit at the top of the world can stay rich. That's what imperialism is. And all the countries around the world that have broken out of imperialism, that have said we are going to control our own economy, we're going to control our own natural resources, we're going to build up our own industries, those are the countries that the U.S. goes to war with. Those are the countries the USA puts sanctions on. Those are the countries the USA invades and tries to overthrow. Those are the countries that we hear on CNN about how they're violating human rights. That's what it's about. China used to be one of the poorest countries in the world, but it took control of its resources. It had a communist revolution, and it seized control of its industries, and now China is the second largest economy in the world. They make half the steel in the world. They have the biggest telecommunications manufacturer that makes the best cell phones in the world. It's called Huawei. They make the fastest trains in the world, and they have the biggest power plant in the world, the Three Gorges Dam. And now that China is no longer an impoverished captive market for Wall Street, now that China is a wealthy country that has broken free, now they are desperate to destroy China. And the same with Russia. Back in the 1990s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia was an impoverished country. People were dying and fleeing from the country en masse. They weren't producing their own food. They were just impoverished. Their industrial base fell apart. But then, starting in 1999, Russian President Vladimir Putin reasserted state control over the economy. They started selling their own oil and their own gas on the international markets. They built up their own industries. They built up their own computer corporations like Yandex. They went from there and they reestablished their farming sector. They're growing their own food again. And now the USA wants to destroy Russia. They were fine when Russia was poor under Yeltsin. But now that Russia is getting rich once again under the leadership of Vladimir Putin, now they want to destroy Russia. Back in the 1990s, Venezuela was a very, very poor country. But then in 1999, they elected Hugo Chavez, and Hugo Chavez seized control of their oil and was using the oil to build up the economy. And he wiped out illiteracy, and he built all kinds of modern universities and schools, and he provided health care to the people. He brought in Cuban doctors to set up healthcare clinics. There are thousands of Venezuelans who had not had their eyesight, who had no vision because of poverty. Because of conditions of poverty, and all they needed was a simple eye surgery to get their eye surgery back. And Hugo Chavez used the oil money of Venezuela to enable thousands of Venezuelans to get their eyesight back. And of course, that's when the United States turned against Venezuela and wanted to overthrow Venezuela. Every country the USA is attacking, whether it's the Islamic Republic of Iran, the government on Cuba, on the island of Cuba, no matter what it is, Nicaragua, these are countries that have broken out of imperialism and started lifting themselves up, and that is why they are targeted, right? And that is what we must understand. We live in the era of capitalism in its monopolistic stage, imperialism. And to be a revolutionary in our time means that you oppose imperialism. And that is what in Russia, when I was just in Russia, I saw the Russian president, Vladimir Putin. I saw him speak. And what is it that Vladimir Putin is emphasizing? Opposing imperialism, getting to a world without imperialism, and at the same time defending what he calls traditional family values. You know, families, parents and kids loving each other and, wanting a better life for your children than you have. Traditional values and opposing the legacy of colonialism and imperialism. And if you look at the countries around the world that have broken out of imperialism, that's what they want to do. They want to develop, they want to build up, and they want to promote families. They want to have more kids. They want to have more people in the world. They want to raise living standards, right? And this is the hope of the world, right? We must oppose the legacy of colonialism and imperialism, and we must defend traditional family values. That is basically what we want. And that doesn't mean we want to kill gay people. That doesn't mean that we want to, be intolerant. It just means that we want people to be happy. It means that we want people to have a better life. It means we want to be optimistic. We want people to be loyal to each other. We want people to cooperate and hold things in common with each other and work together. We want people to have loyalty to their country and their community. That's what we want. So that's really what's going on. But then that brings me to another point, which is that right now, imperialism is in a very big crisis. It is in a big crisis because of technology. Technological development under a system where profit is in command leads to poverty. Self-driving cars would be a great thing in a rational society, right? If the job called driving was not necessary and human labor could be elsewhere expended. If no one ever had to drive again, if the cars all had sensors on them and artificial intelligence and there were no car accidents and cars could just drive themselves, if we had a rational society, that would be a great thing. But in our society, that would lead to mass unemployment. Millions of truck drivers would lose their jobs. Millions of Uber drivers would lose their jobs. Millions of cab drivers, millions of traffic court attendants and state highway patrolmen would lose their jobs. An advance in technology would lead to greater poverty. That is not rational. And what we see in the capitalist mode of production is that there is a constant effort on the part of the capitalist to pay the worker as little as he possibly can, while at the same time produce as many products as he possibly can. And this has a built-in problem because there's always more products created in the process of production than there are wages paid out. And the worker can never buy back what he produces. And the more that technology advances, the more that this problem of abundance creating poverty poverty amid plenty becomes a reality. I tell the story of the coal miner's riddle. There's a little boy and he says to his father, "Why is it so cold?" And the father says, "Because I can't afford any coal. I can't afford any coal to heat the stove in our home." And the boy says, "Father, why can't you afford any coal?" And he says, "Because I lost my job at the coal mine. I got laid off." And the boy says, "Why did you lose your job at the coal mine? Why did you get laid off?" And he says, "Because there is too much coal." That is the problem of the capitalist mode of production. The more efficient technology becomes, the more efficient it is to advance technology, the less and less human labor that is necessary, the poorer people get. Right? That is the problem of the capitalist mode of production. And imperialism, this globalized high-tech capitalism, is now facing a long-term crisis because of the fact that human technological advancement, human creativity has gotten to the point that there's very little role for the worker in production. Automation, artificial intelligence, they're at the point where there's very, very little room for human beings at the assembly line. And in a rational society, if we had a society where the economy was rationally organized, that would be fine. But in our system, where your only value is your ability to sell yourself and rent yourself out to your employer, where human beings are simply financial calculations, and all the major centers of economic power, all the big stores and all the oil wells and all the power plants and all the electricity and everything is operated in order to make profits for a small group of owners. That system is in a huge crisis. And that crisis is built in. It's built into a system where production is organized for profit. And ultimately, what we need in a society where profit is no longer in command, where human beings can rationally organize the economy so that growth can accompany economic prosperity. And as technology advances, living standards can also rise, and that we can march toward a world where human beings live a more and more comfortable life, where technology advances more and more and more, and life becomes more livable and more comfortable for human beings. That is the goal, to create a world of vast abundance, where less and less human labor is necessary, where human beings can have more and more children, where life is more prosperous and there's less and less of a need for government repression, where we can move to a world without prisons, without jails, without police, a world without a state at all. Right? When Marx described what he called the highest stage of communism, he described a world where labor becomes life's prime want and no longer a necessity, meaning that people no longer have to work. They just work because they don't want to be bored. He described a world where the springs of cooperative wealth flow more abundantly. That's what he describes, a world with so much wealth that the state fades away and people can live from each according to his own ability, to each according to his needs. That is the ultimate vision that Marx envisioned, a world of vast abundance. And right now, the capitalist system is having a meltdown because it has become too efficient. But there's a whole section of the world that isn't having this problem. China's not having this problem. Russia's not having this problem. Iran isn't having this problem. Cuba's not having this problem. Nicaragua and Venezuela, they're not having this problem. There's a whole section of the world that has broken out of the irrationality of profits in command and started to grow. And that is what the imperialists are trying to crush. And the imperialist system is in crisis. And there's a whole section of the world that is broken out of that system and is continuing to rise. And that system, where an economy is organized to serve the interests of the country overall, not the profits of a wealthy few, that system is called socialism. And socialism has changed. Socialism is no longer the Soviet way of doing things. There's room for a market in socialism. There's room for hotels and restaurants that are private. There's room for corporations that develop new technology, new computer apps, high-tech startups, etc. But the idea is you have a government that is organized and based in the communities that controls the economy to make sure that the needs of the people are met and to make sure that profit is not in command, right? You have a government of action that mobilizes the people to engage in democratic participation, to rationally plan out and rationally organize the economy so that growth is no longer restrained. You have a state, a revolutionary people's state, a state with a well-organized population that forces the economy to work in the interest of the people overall, right? And in China, they call their system socialism with Chinese characteristics, meaning that it is specific to China. It's not that we could never have the Chinese system over here because it's for China. We could never have the Cuban system over here. That's for Cuba. We could never have the Venezuelan system over here. That's for Venezuela. They call their system in China socialism with Chinese characteristics, and it is our duty to begin cultivating a socialism with American characteristics, a socialism designed to serve the specific needs of our people and our nation in our time. And I would argue that socialism with American characteristics is going to be very Christian in how it operates. Jesus Christ said one can either serve God or money. You can't serve both. No man can serve two masters. One cannot serve both God and money. You must pick one. That's Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ drove the money changers out of the temple. And he said, you cannot turn my Father's house into a den of thieves. Jesus Christ said he was fighting for a world where the last shall be first and the first shall be last. Jesus Christ said he was fighting for a world where none are left behind and none are hungry. And it is with the least among us, with those who are struggling, with those who are left behind with society, that he shared his fate. If you read the Christian Gospels, you are reading the message of a revolutionary, a man who was so revolutionary that the Roman Empire crucified him, that the Sanhedrin and the Pharisees conspired to have him killed. That's what you're reading about. You're reading about a man who said that human labor creates all wealth. That's in the Bible too. Jesus Christ talked about how those who steal should steal no more, but rather they should go and produce wealth for those in need, production according to need. This is all in the Christian Gospels. You read the book of Acts. They describe how in Acts, none among them were without, but they shared all that they had. And many wonders and signs were carried out as they held all things in common. I mean, you read about it. Christianity was a revolutionary movement against an evil empire and against religious hypocrites, people who practiced legalism and were focusing on old, outdated rules rather than the Spirit of God that they could feel within their souls. Jesus was from the tradition of Jeremiah. He was from the tradition of Moses, who smashed the golden calf. He came to say that we should have a connection with our Father in heaven, with God, and not with archaic earthly institutions. He said that right and wrong are what matter, and treating people with kindness, and that living for the sake of others and loving your neighbor as you would love yourself, that is what people should practice and people should live for. And of course, in our time, they're going to try and outlaw that. They're going to try and claim that this religion is anti-Semitic, just like they would claim that the revolutionary movement of the working class that created the Soviet Union, that created China, that organized workers across the world into labor unions, that fought for the right of women to vote, that organized the people around different parts of the planet to fight for their national liberation. Of course, they would tell us that Marxism is also anti-Semitic because Marxism denies the belief that Jewish nationalism should be promoted. Marxism says that the idea of a Jewish nationality, Zionism, Bundism, is reactionary, and that Judaism as a religion and as a strata, right? That the idea that Jews are a separate group that should live separately from the other people, that this is contrary to Marxism. That's what Karl Marx said. That's what Vladimir Lenin said. Of course, they're going to call that anti-Semitic, right? Of course, they're going to say that that is anti-Semitic. But my message to you is that neither Christianity nor Marxism are anti-Semitic. Jesus Christ was Jewish. So was Karl Marx, and so was Vladimir Lenin. And all of them promoted an idea that said we should be fighting to unify all mankind and reject any form of bigotry and reject any notion that one race or one class or one ethnic group is superior to another. All of them said that in their own time, in their own way. They all said that the idea that one race, one class, one ethnic group is superior to others, that is contrary to everything that is right in the world. They all stood for the unity of all people. And that is why the ideology of Zionism, that says that there is one group that is superior, one group that is superior to everybody else, and one group that says that it can never live in common with the others, and that it needs to have a separate state, and that state needs to be getting millions and billions of our tax dollars, and that state should be allowed to bomb and murder the Palestinians, and that state should be able to bomb and attack the Iranian embassy and provoke a war with Iran, and that state shouldn't be criticized for what it does. Zionism, not Judaism, but Zionism, the ideology of Zionism, that ideology is reactionary. And condemning it is something that every Christian should do, and condemning it is something that every communist should do. Zionism, a supremacist ideology that says one group of people is superior, and that one group of people should have the right to engage in crimes against humanity, that one group of people should be given billions and billions of dollars by the countries of the world and be enabled to commit atrocities and to defy the United Nations and to disregard the human rights of others. Zionism must be rejected. Zionism is not good for the Jewish people. It keeps them separate. It pushes an ideology of separatism and isolation. The liberation of Jewish people from the centuries of anti-Semitism that they've suffered will come through joining arm in arm with their class brothers and joining with the international working class. And that is why Theodor Herzl, the founder of Zionism, was so opposed to Marxism, because Marxism negates Zionism. And that is also why the leaders of Israel are so opposed to Christianity, because Christianity negates Zionism. Christianity says that anyone can be saved as long as they live according to their principles, as long as they live for the sake of others, as long as they confess their sin. Anyone can be saved. No race is superior. No ethnic group is superior, but all the people can be saved, that salvation is offered to everyone, and that we should live for the sake of others, that we should love our fellow human beings. That's what Christianity says. And Marxism says that all of humanity has a common struggle against capitalism and imperialism, and that it is in the interest of all humanity to break out of a system that puts profits over people. It is in the interest of all humanity to strive to build a world where poverty and wealth no longer walk hand in hand, and no one gets rich by making anyone else poor, right? That is what Marxism strives to create, a world where wealth and poverty don't exist side by side, but all of society can grow wealthier and wealthier and wealthier as human technology and human innovation advances. Marxism and Christianity are the two greatest enemies of Zionism. The Zionists want to outlaw Christianity, and the Zionists want to outlaw Marxism, because both of them, Christianity and Marxism, negate their hateful supremacist philosophy. And that is why this new law has been put forward. This new law is an attempt to outlaw Christianity and outlaw Marxism. And we must reject both. We must reject both being outlawed. We should say that, yes, preaching bigotry is not good. Yes, blaming one person's actions on their entire race or religion, that's not acceptable. But saying that Israel is racist is absolutely correct, because Israel was created as a country for white Europeans, and it was created by the racist British Empire, and it resulted in racist crimes against the Palestinians, and we should say that Israel is racist as much as we can. Nothing wrong with saying that Israel is racist. Furthermore, there is absolutely nothing wrong with upholding the Christian religion, of following the Bible, even though we might question some of what it says. We might question some of the historical accuracy. We might see it as a representation of the Christian tradition, as part of an overall tradition. But attacking Christianity, rejecting Christianity, this must be opposed. This must be opposed. Right? We can embrace both Christianity and Marxism as two different strands of philosophy. It's two different worldviews that overlap in many ways, have clashed in the 20th century, have fought with each other, but both of which are contrary to Zionism. And my hope is that the Christians of the world will embrace socialism and the idea that we need a rationally planned economy. My hope is that the Marxists of this world will embrace Christianity and will embrace the view that there is a higher purpose to life, that we are not simply material beings, that we have souls and spirits, and that right and wrong do exist, and that there is a world beyond the material. I hope that that is the case. I think Marxism has changed. I think that Christianity has changed. And I think that all of humanity is realizing that we're all in this together, and that ultimately we need to do what the parts of the world that have broken free from imperialism have already done. That is what we need to do. I think there's a clip I want to put on, and this is a clip from, I think, if I can find it here. Is it on here? Yeah, it's on here. This is at the World Youth Festival that I was at. The Russian president ended his speech very poetically. You know, Putin is not a communist, right? He's a Russian Orthodox Christian. He's more of a Russian nationalist, I guess you could argue. But he comes from a communist background, right? He was in the KGB, which was the communist police force of Russia. And he understands Marxist economics, and he's very clearly, applied his Marxist understanding of economics in order to fix Russia's economy. This is how he ended his speech at the World Youth Festival.
Ну так вот, мы появляемся на свет равными, но вопрос, растем ли мы, развиваемся ли мы в равных условиях?
So, we are born equal. But the question is, do we grow? Do we develop in equal conditions?
Ответ, к сожалению, нет. Равных условий в мире для всех не существует.
Answer, unfortunately, no. There are no equal conditions in the world for everyone.
И это главная несправедливость сегодняшнего мироустройства, сегодняшнего мира.
This is the main injustice of today's world order, today's world.
А если вы меня спросите, а можно ли сделать так, чтобы все были в равных условиях и росли в равных условиях, развивались, раскрывали свои таланты на пользу своим близким, своей семье, своей стране, а может быть и всему человечеству?
And if you ask me, is it possible to make sure that everyone is on equal terms and that everyone grows in equal conditions, develops, reveals their talents for the benefit of their loved ones, their family, their country, and perhaps all of humanity?
Я не знаю.
I don't know.
Но что я точно знаю? Мы все должны стремиться к этому.
But I know for sure that we should all strive for this.
Даже сам факт того, что мы будем к этому стремиться, уже это сделает мир более прозрачным, более справедливым, более демократичным, более устойчивым, сбалансированным и более безопасным.
The very fact that we will strive for this will make the world more transparent, fairer, more democratic, more sustainable, balanced and safer.
Дорогие друзья, вы приехали в Россию, у вас появилось здесь много друзей.
Dear friends, you came to Russia. You made many friends here.
Я хочу, чтобы вы знали, Россия теперь ваш друг.
I want you to know that all of Russia is now your friend.
Yeah, he's basically saying that they want to create a world of full equality, of equality of opportunity, a world of vast abundance, and that we may not get there, but just striving to build it will make the world a better place. That's how he ended. He basically ended his speech with a call for the vision of communism. I thought that was very, very powerful. So on that note, folks, I do see we have a number of super chats to answer. We don't have any Rumble rants, but we do have some super chats, and I will be happy to answer those super chats. But before I answer them, I would like to do a roll call, as we always do. So who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. All right. Nate in stormy Chicago. Mark in Utica, New York. Sydney, George Muniz. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Jenny in Cincinnati. St. David's, Bermuda. Four Oaks, North Carolina. Cleveland, Schlesinger. We got Bill from New Hampshire, Ed in Louisville. We got Tampa, Florida. Oh, wow. A lot of things are coming. A lot of them are coming in. We got David Muller from Colombia. We got Ardi from Indonesia. We got Neo from Michigan, St. Louis, Gary from Sweet Home, Oregon, Neo from Michigan, the Seasoned Noob from China, Bobby Taylor from Virginia, Joe in New Jersey, home of the revolution, Bendigo, David Fox, Newton Grove, North Carolina, Colin in Greensboro, Briggy in Pennsylvania, I'm here, Mohican. We got Master Jack in South Africa. It's a strange, strange world you live in, Master Jack. All right, Jenny Boris in Fremont, California. Welcome, Jenny Boris. Good to have you with us. All right, we got someone from the European Union, the Netherlands. Nick from Nottingham. Welcome, Nick. Good to have you with us. Names and locations. Names and locations. There we go. Ian from Melbourne. Welcome, Ian. We got Cumbria from the United Kingdom. Welcome, Cumbria. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? We got Northern Michigan, A Better America. Sanford in North Carolina. Bob in Troy, New York. We got Crooklyn. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Names and locations. Names and locations. We got Dan from MacArthur Park, Los Angeles. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Joshua is English. Welcome. Welcome, Joshua. Yusa. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, everybody. All right, so I've got 8 super chats that are here. I do appreciate them, and I intend to give them all. Oh, and we have a Rumble rant. I'll answer that one first. That's from Chow Chow Kathy. I will answer the super chats and the Rumble rants. I do appreciate any more that people can send because this is what helps me pay my bills. This is what, we got April and Chris in Salt Lake City. This is what enables me, Anthony in Northern British Columbia. This is what enables me to maintain my rent here in New York City where the rent is too damn high. This enables me to, have this nice apartment with an extra room so I can do my work. So it's always appreciated if people send their super chats. Oh, Mariah in North Carolina says, happy Thursday. It's always a pleasure. It's always appreciated if you can send a super chat. always appreciated. So if you can do that, that would be great. Send a super chat to give me something to talk about here in the second half of the show. And also send a super chat in order to support the channel, because it's always appreciated. It's always appreciated. I've got some new ideas for ways we can intervene at upcoming events and activities for CPI to engage in. Join the Center for Political Innovation. We've just had a new member join us after he had a great time at the retreat. Shout out to you if you're watching. We're glad to have you. And we are always happy to have new members. I think we're up to 158 members now of the CPI. We're a growing organization, and we're doing great things. And we would love to, we would love to have more members to do great activities and, have little conferences and events and educate people. We got the rally coming up. Oh, John McCarthy in Chicago. We got the rally coming up July 7th, and some other different activities. Oh, South Africa. Some other different activities planned. So I am gonna start answering people's super chat questions. However, at some point, I am having the allergies. My voice is a little weird tonight. So I may take a break and put on some music at some point just to get my voice back. But I'm going to start answering people's questions. So the first is a Rumble rant. It's from Chow Chow Kathy. Can you explain what Jeffrey Sachs' participation in Russia's economy contributed to the fall of the Soviet Union? Not to condemn or judge him. Well, Chow Chow Kathy, you're misunderstanding the point, right? If you read the book, this book by Naomi Klein, The Shock Doctrine, it wasn't that he participated in the fall of the Soviet Union. It was after the Soviet Union fell. Jeffrey Sachs was the economic advisor who was brought in by the United States to advise Boris Yeltsin's administration. He comes out of Columbia University, and Jeffrey Sachs, he advised the Yeltsin administration about how to go about selling off the state resources. And he played a similar role in Bolivia in the 1990s as well. You have to remember, Jeffrey Sachs is now retired. So because he's no longer, being dispatched by the Clinton administration around the world to wreck countries' economies, he can say a lot of very good things. He admits he was too neoliberal, and he admits that. And that's good. And he now says a lot of things that I would agree with. However, in the 1990s, he played a very, very negative role in Russia and in Latin America. They called him the butcher of Bolivia. Andre Gunder Frank called his economic policies that he implemented in Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union economic genocide. He played a very negative role. But now, because he is more independent, he says a lot of positive things. He does the World Happiness Index for the United Nations, and he makes a lot of statements observing the economic achievements of China and Russia and other anti-imperialist countries. He's critical of U.S. foreign policy. He came out and said that he thought that, a certain virus that went everywhere probably originated in a U.S. lab. That was a really big deal for him to say that. Jeffrey Sachs, at this point, he says a lot of good things, but, he's no longer doing the job. Jimmy Carter says a lot of great things, too. He's no longer president, right? When Jimmy Carter was president, he presided over U.S. destabilization and wars. But now that he's retired, he can, talk about the Palestinians. He can talk about all kinds of things, right? When people are doing the job, they do the job, as they're supposed to. But when they're independent, when they retire, they can say a lot of good things. That's how these things tend to work. So I hope that is helpful, Chow Chow Kathy. All right. That part about not minimizing the Holocaust should make it illegal to fund and arm Ukrainian militias. Exactly. There's this huge blind spot for the fact that in Ukraine, the forces being backed by the United States include people that honor a Holocaust collaborator named Stepan Bandera. Stepan Bandera was an individual in Ukraine who joined the Nazis when the Nazis invaded, helped round up Jews to go to concentration camps and get killed. And Israel has no problem collaborating with them. The U.S. government has no problem collaborating with them. They've got Nazi tattoos. They openly say they wish Hitler had won the Second World War. But all of this anti-Semitism and all of this, everyone's a Nazi and all of this, they just have a big blind spot, a huge blind spot for Ukraine. And it really reveals how that, the cancel culture is very, very selective. It's all very selective. Certain people get accused of anti-Semitism and certain people don't. And it's very, very selective. And that must be acknowledged, right? Pat Buchanan has said many anti-Semitic and pro-Hitler things, but he's on mainstream television all the time. Whereas, they go out of their way to invent anti-Semitism on other people's part. Other figures get targeted and accused of being anti-Semitic when they didn't do anything. So it's very selective who gets accused of being anti-Semitic and who doesn't. Caleb, from an eschatological point of perspective, I believe the next step for these AIPAC politicians will be demanding Christians deny Christ. It's coming. Wow. I really hope that you are wrong, Mariah. I did grow up in a small town. I remember watching Left Behind, the very, very Zionist and pro-Israel end times TV show. And it was like a bunch of movies, and there was novels and stuff. And that seemed to be part of it, right? Now, the guy who wrote the Left Behind books was a very pro-Israel Zionist. But he did have kind of a dystopian end times narrative where there becomes a world dictator who controls the world and is forcing everyone to deny Christianity. And, that was a big part of being an evangelical Christian in the early years of the 20th century during the Bush administration. I was alive during those years. I was first getting political during those years. And I remember can't remember the writer's name, but he's now a very big Christian Zionist, and I mean, he wrote these Left Behind novels about the end times. And, those Left Behind novels had a lot in them about some kind of world government forcing people to deny Jesus and things like that. So I'm Tim LaHaye, that's his name, right? And that was, Tim LaHaye. Thank you. Yes, Tim LaHaye. I forgot his name. Yeah. And that's a big part of it. One of the things that I find to be particularly crazy, right, is that evangelical Christians are the biggest Zionists you've ever heard of. But Zionists, somehow they just don't notice that. Right. It's weird. Right. The evangelical Christians have Israeli flags in their church. They are taught that it is their duty to always support Israel because of the Bible, because of the end times, etc. But yet you listen to Zionists talk in New York City, you would think that every Christian wants to murder the Jews. It's nuts. And I was told by a so-called communist in New York City that every single person in Ohio thinks that Jews have horns and tails. I have never met anyone in my life who thinks that Jews have horns and tails. And part of the Zionist mindset is this victim complex that deep down, all non-Jews are just bloodthirsty anti-Semites who want to kill Jews all the time. And that makes it okay to lie to us. That makes it okay to, be heavy and repressive against us and try to silence us, because deep down we're all just a bunch of Nazis. And it's not true. It is not in any way conceivably true. And in fact, there are more Christian Zionists in America than there are Jewish Zionists in America. But yet the Zionist philosophy insists, oh no, we're on the brink of another Holocaust. We're all going to be killed. It is a bizarre mindset, right? That the Zionists, they take their kids to very elite schools, very expensive private schools, where they traumatize these kids. They show them Holocaust movies over and over and over again. I worked at an insurance firm, and I remember one of the women I worked with, her kid wanted to go see the Transformers movie. But when he found out that the movie theater he wanted to see the Transformers movie at was in Bay Ridge in Brooklyn, and it was near a mosque, he didn't want to go to the movie because he was afraid he was going to get blown up in the movie theater, because he'd seen so much hateful anti-Islamic, pornography in his private school. He had seen so much hateful anti-Arab, anti-Muslim, messaging that he was terrified to go to a movie theater in a neighborhood in New York City that was near a mosque, right? They traumatized their children to believe that it's just a matter of time before they get rounded up and put on trains again. And they traumatize their children. They use the Holocaust to traumatize their children and inculcate in their children this idea that everyone wants to kill them, everyone's out to get them, everyone's a bloodthirsty anti-Semite. If someone's not Jewish, they're a bloodthirsty racist bigot who wants to throw them in a gas chamber, right? And that's not the case, right? And in fact, evangelical Christians are some of the biggest supporters of Israel. But you talk to Zionists, they think every evangelical wants to kill them. Donald Trump, huge supporter of Israel. But New York City Zionists all think Donald Trump is the next Hitler, right? And all the people, cheering for Donald Trump are all a bunch of Nazis, right? They're bigots, right? Zionism is a form of bigotry. And, it's that whole thing about hurt people. The Holocaust hurt people, a lot of people. People were horrendously traumatized in the Holocaust. And so now you have a group of people that was horrendously traumatized in the Holocaust that think they have the right to horrendously traumatize everybody else. Now, there's some people who survived the Holocaust that have the opposite perspective. And I saw them in Foley Square. A lot of Jews had signs that said, "Never again to anyone." And that was a rebuttal to the Jewish Defense League. The Jewish Defense League, the JDL, a very, very violent Zionist group, their slogan was "never again." Like, we'll never again let the Holocaust happen, right? So, but these Jews, and I saw many of them, I think this is really awesome. They were marching around and they had signs that said, "Never again to anyone," meaning not just to Jews. Never again will they tolerate genocide of any race, right? That's what they were saying. And they see what is happening to the Palestinians, the bombardment and the plans that Zionist politicians are making up for the forced deportation of all the Palestinians. They see that as basically a genocidal plan. And so as Jews, they say never again to anyone, Never will this ever happen to anyone, right? And that is, I think, a very admirable message, a very, very admirable message. This is, there's nuance to all of this. That's why they want to outlaw comparing what Israel does to the Palestinians to the Nazis, because everyone can see the parallel, right? You tell one group of people that they are the master group, that they are the supreme race, and that they have the right to then exterminate and wipe out other races. You can see the very obvious parallels there. However, they want to make it illegal to point that out, right? I mean, I can admit that some of the ways that my white ancestors came to this country and murdered the Native Americans, that was like what the Nazis did. I can admit that some of the way that black people were packed onto ships and the transatlantic passage and millions of them died coming to the United States, that was like what the Nazis did. I can admit that what was done to various groups throughout history was like what the Nazis did. So why does one country get a pass? Why does one country get a pass that we can never compare what they do to the Nazis? Everybody gets compared to the Nazis, right? If you're on the internet for 2 minutes, they compare you to the Nazis. But now they want to make it unacceptable and illegal for one country, one Pacific country can never be compared with the Nazis. That is ridiculous. That is a ridiculous thing. And we should just call it out for what it is. This is a ridiculous, ridiculous attack on the freedom of Americans, of the religious freedom of Americans, the political free speech of Americans. Absolutely ridiculous. Genocide should always be called out, no matter who's doing it. All right. Next question. They keep screaming about Sharia law, but after this law, the Bible is more legal in Iran than it is in the United States. That is a very good point, right? I mean, who would have thought that we would have a law that would try to outlaw a number of passages from the Bible, and that all these evangelical religious congressmen who go to churches that insist the Bible is absolutely true, that embrace creationism, the 6-day creation, suddenly they're okay voting for a piece of legislation that renders verse after verse in the Bible illegal. That is outrageous, right? That is absolutely outrageous. And I don't think any of them are Jewish, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to question their loyalty. Why would you try to outlaw the religious practices of your country in order to suppress people from protesting and criticizing another country? And that's another thing I'm not allowed to do. I'm not supposed to question their loyalty. Well, I question their loyalty. If you are a Christian congressman or congresswoman and you voted for this law, for this, recognition of the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, I question your loyalty to America. It doesn't matter if you're Jewish or Hindu or Muslim or Christian or whatever, right? If you voted for this law, I don't understand how you can be loyal to this country. This country was founded on religious freedom, and it was founded on people who came here because they wanted to study and interpret the Bible for themselves. So how can you say that something that is said over and over again in the Bible, regardless of how you interpret it, regardless of whether you think it's historically accurate, it is said over and over again in the Bible? How can you make that illegal? There we go. Today marks the anniversary of the tragic events in Odessa that took the lives of 48 anti-government protesters who were burnt alive in the House of Trade Unions. Of course, CNN did not report on it. The massacre in the House of Trade Unions that happened back in 2014 was abominable. A group of people in Ukraine who opposed the new government that was installed by the United States, they gathered in the trade union house in Odessa, and the fascists that were backed by the United States, they tried their hardest to attack them. They barricaded themselves in the House of Trade Unions, and then they lit the building on fire. And these people were inside the House of Trade Unions. And so they began jumping out of the windows to try and escape the flames. And as they jumped out of the windows, these neo-Nazi thugs were beating them to death with baseball bats. And you can watch one of the videos. There's a woman who jumps out of the House of Trade Unions. She jumps out of the House of Trade Unions window. And one of the Nazis, one of the U.S.-backed Ukraine separatist thugs, Ukraine nationalist, ultra-nationalist thugs, goes over to her, and he sees that it's a woman. And so he stops. He says, "It's a woman." And then the man standing next to him, the neo-Nazi thug next to him, says, "She's not a woman. She's a separatist." And then he beats her to death with a baseball bat. These are murderers. These are absolute murderers. Right? Absolute murderers. And you look at the massacre in the House of Trade Unions, how they've tried to cover it up, how Wikipedia has tried to whitewash it. That is Holocaust denial. There was a massacre by a group of Nazis who were backed by the United States, and they tried to erase it from public memory. Absolutely criminal. Absolutely criminal. All right. And thank you, Nabi. I am glad that you appreciate what I do on these broadcasts. I am glad that you appreciate it. I am going to keep doing what I do, and I appreciate your support. All support is appreciated. I'm going to do these streams as much as I can. We have a job to do. I love my job as a reporter for Russian television. I'm proud of the work that I do, and I will continue to do my job well, but we have a mission to spread anti-imperialist politics, to build a community of solidarity and resistance here in the United States. And so I appreciate all who support that mission that I carry out and that I have dedicated myself to. We have a job to do. We have a purpose to live for. We have something that we need to do. We need to spread the politics of anti-imperialism. The textbook that the Center for Political Innovation published and debuted at our great weekend workshop in Vermont. It's now available on Amazon, Out of the Movement to the Masses. If I had my copy here, I would hold it up. I've got the copy, it's probably like over there, or it's somewhere around here. I would hold it up, but I just don't have it on me at the moment. But our new textbook, it's a real masterwork. It's got a lot in it. Out of the movement to the masses. We must build an anti-imperialist movement in our time. That is what we absolutely must do. There is no alternative to it. We have a job to do. And I must say, I don't want to get into too much detail about this. But the name of the book, Out of the Movement to the Masses, right? And I guess I can put on the screen, the title of the book, Out of the Movement to the Masses. I can put the cover, right? That it has never been so clear to me as it is now, why we have to get out of the movement to the masses, right? The left had kind of lost its way for a while. The left was saying a lot of things that were, they were blatantly pro-imperialist. They were supporting the bombing of God, or they were supporting demonizing Russia. They were trying to drive out Trump because the imperialists thought he wasn't a reliable ally, etc. This is the textbook, Out of the Movement to the Masses. So it is a masterpiece. Let me just put it that way. We put a lot of work into this textbook, and it is really a masterpiece. But the title is a slogan that I've been using since the beginning of these streams. I've been using the slogan, Out of the Movement to the Masses. And so we made it the title of the book, right? And it's about the history of anti-imperialist politics in America. We've been using that slogan for a while. And, the slogan goes back to, the time, goes back to the time when, the masses of Americans were waking up and opposing the wars. But in the United States, the left was just defending the establishment and was not talking to Trump supporters. But now we're at the point where, there is a left that is doing anti-imperialist work. They are protesting what Israel is doing and what the United States is backing Israel in doing. And yesterday I went to the rally that the left had. And while I agree with what they were saying, I just found the left, I found them to be unbelievable, right? I agree with the left, but they don't have a mass approach. They don't want to win over the bulk of the American people. They think that the American people are the enemy, and they're oozing with negativity, right? And it really just makes you sad. But years ago, I went to a funeral for a communist who had died, an older communist woman that I really looked up to. And the funeral was kind of like a reunion. But everybody there, the older communists who were there, they were almost mad at everybody who was there because everyone there had committed some unforgivable sin. Everybody there was, had strayed from the party line somehow, had done something wrong. And that a lot of communist politics is just oozing in negativity and hostility, hatred for the country that you're living in, hatred for the working class and the bulk of the population. And CPI has always been having a different approach. Our approach has always been to try and win over the bulk of the population, to have a positive message rather than a negative one, to put forward a message. I always say, I'm a socialist, not because I want to destroy America, but because I want to save America. Getting rid of imperialism and breaking out of imperialism would make a better country for American working families. And when we did our outreach around Palestine that we did in when we were in the what do you call it? When we were at the oh gosh, it's escaping me. When we were in Portland, when we did our outreach, for our conference, raising the issue of Palestine, we framed it as Palestine and the attacks on the Palestinians is bad for America, right? And that we see socialism as a struggle to improve the lives of working families, to make a better life for working people in the United States, right? So, I want to show you. That's why I'm so excited that we're going to have a rally in Washington, D.C. on July 7th, because the last time we were in Washington, D.C., we had a rally that was very different than other rallies, right? This is what our rally looked like, right? This is our rally that we had at the White House. We looked very different. I'm going to show you a couple clips from it, right? A couple clips from our rally at the White House.
The last time that Tehran put your mom into a hospital and would not allow her to get out of it because you do not have enough money to pay for her health care. I don't know about you folks, but it is Washington that has imposed that on me. It is Washington that has imposed that on American families for decades. So no, our enemies are not in Tehran. Our enemies are not in Beijing. Our enemies are not in Moscow. Our enemies are not anywhere else on the planet except for sitting right here in Washington, D.C., sitting in the White House.
Look at that. We're wearing nice clothes. We're dressed nicely. We have American flags, and we're making a populist appeal to the American working class. We're not putting the American working class as being our enemy. We're making a populist appeal.
To gain. They are playing with our lives. They're playing with American lives. The way out is not war, it's peace and development. Defund Ukraine! Defund Ukraine! Defund Ukraine! Defund Ukraine! Defund Ukraine! Defund Ukraine!
Look at that. A lot of working Americans could see a rally like that and come join it, and they would appreciate such a rally. They wouldn't see it as hateful or against them. They would see it as in their interest. This is the kind of politics that we need.
More infrastructure. We need to build up our country. No degrowth. No war in Ukraine. We need to stop all movements toward nuclear war. For my kids, for your kids, for all children in this whole planet.
Yeah, look at that, right? That's the kind of messaging. We want to have a rally that looks like that in Washington, D.C. on July 7th. That's the kind of rally that we want to have. A rally that looks like, like we are working in the interest of the country, which we are. It is a great rally, right? And this is what those Palestine rallies would look like if they were serious, right? If these Palestine rallies were going to win, if they were going to come across and communicate to people, what is going to win them over. Look, I'll just show you. I showed this on a whole nother stream. I'm not going to show the whole thing, but I'm going to briefly show you, some of what we did when we were in Portland, right? I'll just put it on the screen for just a brief amount of time. You can watch this. It's on the channel.
Free Palestine. We're here to say that this country could have a whole great future beyond imperialism. Beyond the rule of the big corporations and banks and monopolies, we can rebuild this country and make it into something beautiful. The global imperialist system is oppressing people across the planet, and it's also oppressing people right here. We are against the imperialist system. We are for a new America where working families have what they need and growth and innovation is promoted beyond the rule of profiteers. We are opposed to the system that spreads war and spreads destruction across the planet to enrich a small group of billionaire monopolies. And that includes backing up Israel and its crimes against the Palestinian people. We are for a whole new society, a new America, where the working class controls the means of production, the banks, factories, and industries. A new America where human needs come first, not the profits of a wealthy few. A new America where innovation and scientific advances are being carried out and promoted. Dare to struggle, dare to win. A world beyond imperialism. Money for jobs and schools in America, not for Israeli crimes against the Palestinian people. Join us. Center for Political Innovation. It's going to be good.
Much the opposite of
We're talking about. So, Center for
Yeah, you look at it. This is the approach that we take, right? We don't approach people as the enemy. We approach people with a winning message, a populist message, right? We actually want to win over the American people, unlike the so-called left. So there we go. Have you been following the situation in Georgia? Scott says they're about to go through a Maidan coup attempt. It looks that way to me too. It appears that as they're fighting about this law that's been proposed, which they're calling a Russian law, which it's actually very much based on the Foreign Agents Registration Act, the law they're using against Uhuru. As there's debate about that law, instability is rising. We know the United States wants to create instability all around Russia, right? That's why they destabilized Ukraine. That's why they destabilized Afghanistan for so long, right? It goes back to the 80s, but even in the last few years, I mean, you know, they want to surround the anti-imperialist countries with drug gangs, with chaos, with fanatical ultra-nationalist movements and instability as a way of weakening them, right? And they want to force them to have to, you know, deal with the military situation on their border. So, yes, we should keep our eye on the situation in Georgia. It's not good. It's not good. And it's not good for the Georgian people. So there we go. Did you see Biden on Howard Stern? I heard that Biden was being called, you know, the father of the country or something like that. It kind of paralleled the Mamala stuff that they did with Kamala Harris, which we skewered in our last, you know, stream. We made fun of that nonsense from Kamala Harris. But I haven't had a chance to see it yet. I don't think I'm able to do that tonight because my strength is starting to run out, unfortunately, for tonight. I'm reaching the end of my rope, but we'll keep that in mind for future streams. And thank you, Funky, for raising that. They want to guarantee Ukrainian pensions for the next 10 years, yet they do nothing to guarantee pensions for Americans from corporate sabotage, stealing our U.S. tax dollars. In 1776, these thieves would have been run through. Indeed. I mean, it's outrageous. It's outrageous that they I mean, it's just like Israel, you know, with our tax money, they give their people free healthcare. We give them billions of dollars every year and their people get free healthcare. But here in America, we don't. You know, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. And, you know, I mean, when that Enron thing happened, a lot of people lost money from their pensions because of it. I know a lot of Americans, their retirement pensions, their retirement pensions decreased when the Enron scandal happened. You remember that happened. And that, yes, yeah, I mean, Ukraine is demanding billions of dollars in American taxpayer money, just like Israel is, just like the government on Taiwan is. It's utterly outrageous. And the American people are losing out. Our living standards are dropping. Our lives are getting worse. And I mean, our government is not loyal to us. It is loyal to imperialism. It is loyal to this global financial system called imperialism. And thank you, Crooklyn. I do appreciate it. I do appreciate it. You know, anything folks can do to help us maintain this YouTube channel and make my life easier while I continue to try and build a community of solidarity dedicated to our message. It's always appreciated. So now I'm going to put on the closing music. I'll be back tomorrow. Probably tomorrow evening. We're just going to keep doing these streams as much as we can. Thank you all for being supporters of our community. I'm going to put on the closing music and we'll be back. Check out the interview I did today with Chairman Omali Yeshitela. It was a great conversation that we had, and, you know, we are very much building a movement. I mean, the 4 days I spent in Vermont were very rewarding. Let me just put it that way. Wait till y'all see some of the video. There we go.
New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.